My final question in the 1 minute, Chairperson, is, Mr. Khoza, you've been on the board for some time now. If you had to rate governance at Eskom from 1 to 10, 10 being the best and 1 being hopeless, where would you rate governance at Eskom in the last 3 years?
In the last 2 years, maybe around 3. Take into account the turnover in terms of the chairpersons and the turnover in the executive level that has taken place.
Governance at 3 out of 10. I rest my case, Chairperson.
You have saved me about 6 minutes, 5.5. Oh, okay, thank you very much, Honorable Singh. Honorable Swart, they are not transferable, though.
Chairperson, I think it's important, firstly, to say from our side, to thank all those very committed staff members at Eskom. We alluded to it yesterday. 46,000 odd members of staff that work very hard every day to keep the lights on. That is their job, but under very difficult circumstances. And we know Eskom is a very critical SOE. Our economic growth depends on it, our fiscal path depends on it. And so from our side, I think it's important to thank those hardworking people. But then just to touch on the last question of 3 out of 10, is 3 not too much out of 10? Because if you take, Mr. Khoza, that the credibility, sadly, and you alluded to the fact that there are many hardworking people, and we accept that. You alluded to the fact yesterday, but there are a few rotten people, I'll use the word rotten apples, that are being dealt with. And that impacts the whole of the standing of Eskom. And if you look, Mr. Mashela Koko lying on carte blanche about the prepayment, Mr. Mashela Koko lying about the knowledge of his stepdaughter's contract, Minister Brown unaware of the 2.1 billion guarantee, you as acting chairman, unaware of the 2.1 billion. Minister Brown lied to you about the trillion. The relationships with the Guptas, the S's, the Zumas that are coming out. The changing of charge sheets. Surely this gives a picture, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, that the credibility, sadly, of Eskom is that of a trillion invoice. Can we believe what is being said? And so that is where we are faced with at the moment. But just with that in hindsight, one of the statements you make in your representation, paragraph 8.1, I wish to point out that Eskom was not involved in the purchase of Optimum Holdings by Tegeta and is therefore unable to assist the committee in this regard, as this was a commercial transaction between 2 companies. Eskom was not involved in the purchase of Optimum. Now that is blatantly not true. We know for a fact that Eskom was deeply involved in that. Right from the word go, Eskom was dealing with the hardship contract from 2013. Mr. Molefe comes on board. Suddenly the 4th Amendment to the Ndrina contract is cancelled. He might have valid reasons for that. He rejects it. There's a 2.17 billion rand penalties imposed. We know Minister Zwane goes to Zurich to conclude the arrangements. We have suddenly Section 54 mine stoppages at the Glencore mines. The guarantee of 1.6 billion to Tegeta facilitated by Mr. Singh. The Public Protector's report indicated Mr. Molefe in the vicinity of the Guptas. But the critical involvement of Eskom was Mr. Mashela Koko saying that he refused to allow the sale to go through unless the whole of Optimum Holdings was sold, and not only the mine. So Eskom played an intrinsic role in that. Would you agree? And that statement that you made is not correct?
No, I think the statement is correct if you take into account in terms of the involvement of Eskom as a company. I think the issue that was raised by Mashela Koko, it was based on the security of coal and the arrangement that was already done with the previous owner, that it goes to the package. That's an operational requirement that is required if he has to deal with the coal. But when we go back to the governance issue that you were talking about, I think the governance issue in terms of the processes and policies that exist within the organization, whether procurement or within the level of the delegations that take place within the organization, is very good and is operating, and most of the people are operating about. The issues that you have alluded to where people have lied in public, it's got nothing to do with the proper governance within the operations of the organization. However, it does dent the image, and I agree that it does dent the image of the organization.
You also indicated that there were many, many meetings, and one of the requirements for the Tegeta sale was the cession and the assignment of the coal supply agreement, which means that Eskom obviously did play a role in that. It was a requirement.
That's
you
correct.
understand, for me, it's just difficult where you make that statement, Eskom played no role. You obviously had to play a role. Not only that, we know Mr. Khoza also contacted the minister shortly after he'd been to Zurich. There's the letter where, because, and he justifies it by saying there was an emergency of coal. So he contacts the minister, and the minister's department writes back to him and says, yes, and there must be a 1.6 billion rand prepayment for coal, the guarantee. So you understand the involvement of Eskom, and you say it's from the coal supply side, but from me, it appears that Eskom played an intrinsic role in the whole sale to ensure the guarantee, which you were unaware of, which is another serious governance issue. You indicated when the financial statements that it was news to you that that guarantee had even been granted without your knowledge and the minister. So you understand where I'm coming from to say that Eskom played an intrinsic role in that sale?
Yes, I do understand, as you explained, but on the fundamental issues, I said, once you got a business rescue, that they were engaging with a business rescue, and the only concern from our side was the security of coal. And all that was debated around, and the assistants that were sourced from the DG of the mineral resources was based on the securing of the coal.
Can I just ask you, I put it to Mr. Piers Marsden, who is the business rescue practitioner, that had he been offered the same deal that Tegeta got at the end of the day, with the reduction of the penalties, with the coal being supplied, it would have saved the sale of them going into business rescue. So, and the public protector indicates that it appears, let me use that word because Mr. Malefe and myself had a difference on that, that the board leant over backwards to accommodate Tegeta in the purchase of Optimum. Again, indicating that Eskom played an intrinsic role in facilitating that sale.
I cannot comment about the business rescue because I was not involved to that particular detail. But when it came to the Finance Investment Committee, it was a pre-purchase of the coal from the Optimum, or any company that might be willing to buy Optimum at the time, because it was not clear whether it's going to be Tegeta or any other company at the time, when it was approved as a prepayment of 1.6 billion, which eventually converted into a guarantee.
Is it normal practice for in the case of Mr. Khoza, to contact the minister for his involvement in such a situation? Because his letter was addressed to the minister in December of 2015, shortly after the minister had been to Switzerland. Is that a normal practice?
It's not a normal practice if it was going to go to the minister, and I'm not sure whether it went to the minister, but he can liaise with the DG in the department.
I'm just saying because, sorry, to the DG. Let me correct that, to the DG, to the department. And then the DG came back very quickly to indicate that they were fully supportive of that purchase of Tegeta and the guarantee of the exact figure that was needed. And it's, you understand the complicity that one tries to ascertain here. But let's just have a look at your governance. There's a very important meeting that took place in December, and it was the board tender committee, and it was a discussion of primary energy, and it related to the recommendation to enter the cession and assignment of the coal supply agreement between Optimum and Eskom, and that obviously had to go through your governance structures.
That's correct.
And you were at that meeting, you chaired the meeting, Mr. Khoza was there, and various other people. The recommendation then was to enter into the cession and assignment of the coal supply agreement between Optimum Holdings and Eskom from Glencore operations to Tegeta, right? And there was a motivation, and that was the motivation that was then brought by Mr. Khoza, and it was explained that there was preconditions. This session was a precondition for the sale. So you again see Eskom playing a key role. Understandably, you need a precondition. Would you agree with that? That was a precondition for the sale? The cession of the coal contract.
Yes, definitely.
So in other words, without that, that sale could not have taken place.
Correct.
And therefore, Eskom played an intrinsic role in the sale of Optimum to Tegeta in that light. You must concede that, obviously.
What it indicates there to say, if you have to pay the amount, you can only pay the amount if the sales has gone through. That was a precondition.
So without that precondition from Eskom, the sale would not have gone through. Is that correct?
It can't go through because
It
you can't
correct.
pay
But
somebody
yes
if
or
that
no?
person
I mean, it's
doesn't get
obvious.
called.
Yes or no?
That's correct.
And therefore, Optimum played a role in the sale. Correct. You've got to concede the point. I don't know why you hesitate, Mr. Khoza. It's here in the documents.
No, as I said, the context to say the precondition, what said, is pre-sale. It has, the sale between Optimum and Tegeta has to go through if you have to pay Tegeta.
Well, let's just read the minutes. It was explained that approval for the cession of the coal supply was a precondition to the transaction between Glencore and Tegeta. It's a precondition of the sale. There it says in your own minutes. Please, it's straightforward. It's not I'm not trying to catch you out. It's a precondition.
It's a precondition, yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. But what is also very interesting is that when one looks at this further, and one considers the various aspects that are involved here and the guarantee that was supplied, you obtained financial advice on that guarantee, according to your minutes.
That's correct.
And the financial advice you got was from Regiment's Capital. Is that correct? And there it's according to the minutes.
That's correct.
And that we know is Mr. Eric Woods and the SM family involved in Regiment's Capital, which became Trillion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we see that you understand where you can see the dots being linked together now. And in hindsight, it's very clear, and that is what we are doing now. We see the precondition, we see the role that Eskom played in facilitating that sale, and we see that the guarantee was arranged by Capital, Regiment's Capital. They gave the approval to the board. They said they've looked at the due diligence and that. And then we see the guarantee being granted ABSA. Now, just tell me a little bit, you say you've got no knowledge of that guarantee. To me, it's unheard of for a company to grant another company a 1.6 billion rand guarantee to buy a third company. Have you ever experienced that in your limited experience as a board member and now board chairman?
No, but what I've been informed is that at the time, I think the investment committee approved 1.6 billion as a pre-purchase of coal at the time. However, when it came to implementation, and advice was given by the head of Treasury at the time within the organization to say it's more risky to lay down the cash against the payment. It's easy to utilize the guarantee. Unfortunately, that guarantee, then it went via the CFO, and I had the head of legal confirm to the bank to say Mr. Anwar Singh had a delegation, because he had a delegation to do whatever to make sure that the transaction take place.
And he went to the bank with Mr. Gupta. That is the evidence we have from ABSA. You might not know that.
I don't know that.
But that in itself is a breach of the PFMA, because neither yourself nor the minister was aware of that. Would you agree with that?
I agree that we were not aware of the guarantee.
But if you look at the PFMA Act, you will see that it would be a breach of the Act itself.
Definitely, yes.
Have you reported that to the police yet?
It has been identified and is part of the areas that we're investigating.
You see, what you've explained to us yesterday was you investigate, you appoint lawyers firms at great firms to investigate, they bring back recommendations, and then you review those recommendations, and it's a bit of a concern to me. You should act on those reports instantly to restore the credibility of Eskom. Would you not agree with that?
I agree that in future, I think whenever we have investigated, we will take I think sometimes it takes too long.
I'm so sorry. Just to ask you, McKinsey, please follow my advice. They came here and they said they're going to pay you 1 billion rand. You need that money.
Yes, we do.
Bring an urgent court application to have that contract reviewed. They will not oppose it. You will get your money. You need it. Do it now. Thank you so much.
It's left. I wanted to alert you that you still have one and
No, sorry. Would you consider that?
Definitely will consider it.
Do it, because they are prepared to pay you the money. You're sitting with financial constraints.
Okay, we'll do.
And please bring it. Thank you, Chair. I've concluded.